Good afternoon. I'm Joe West, Interim Dean for the University of Georgia's College of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences. It's my honor to welcome you here today to one of the most exciting days of the year for our college, the 2020 D.W. Brooks Lecture. We thank you for joining us from all over, and we would like to extend a special welcome to Ms. Nancy Brooks, the daughter of the late D.W. Brooks, and to her family for joining us here today. Today, we'll enjoy what promises to be a very thought-provoking lecture, and will continue to carry on the legacy of D.W. Brooks, a man who laid the foundation for the work that we do today. D.W. Brooks has the distinction of being both the youngest and the oldest faculty member of our college. He began teaching in our college at the age of 19 and returned after a long career in agriculture to serve as a visiting professor until his death at the age of 97. He truly dedicated his entire life to the college and to improving agriculture. For those who may not be familiar with Mr. Brooks's impact and legacy, we have a video of his life that we encourage you to view on our website, which is dwbrooks.cas.uga.edu. I would like to take a brief moment to introduce you to the 2020 winners of the D.W. Brooks Faculty Awards for Excellence, the college's top honor for our faculty. The award for excellence in teaching goes to Gregory Colson, Associate Professor in the Department of Agricultural and Applied Economics. The award for excellence in research goes to Esther Vandernap, Professor in the Department of Horticulture and the Institute of Plant Breeding, Genetics, and Genomics. The award for excellence in extension goes to Tim Coulomb, Professor in the Department of Horticulture. The award for excellence in public service extension goes to Philip Edwards, a UGA Cooperative Extension County Coordinator and Agricultural and Natural Resources Agent in Irwin County. The award for excellence in global programs goes to Bob Kemmerite, Professor in the Department of Plant Pathology. You can learn more about our winners on our website and through our social media channels over the course of this week. Congratulations to the winners of the D.W. Brooks Faculty Awards for Excellence. Now, on behalf of the University of Georgia and the College of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences, it is my true honor to introduce you to our guest speaker, Ms. Julie Borlaug. Julie Borlaug is continuing the legacy of her late grandfather, agronomist and Nobel laureate Norman E. Borlaug, and inspiring the next generation by advocating for innovation and technology in agricultural production to end world hunger. Ms. Borlaug is Vice President of External Relations for Inari Agriculture, a seed company using data and biological science to transform plant breeding, using approaches that significantly reduce inputs like land and water required to produce food and feed. Headquartered in Cambridge, Massachusetts, the company was named a technology pioneer by the World Economic Forum last year. Ms. Borlaug has developed agricultural partnerships between public, private, and philanthropic groups to expand the mission to feed the world's hungry. She previously served as Director of Strategic Initiatives for Texas A&M AgriLife Research, Associate Director of External Relations for the Borlaug Institute for International Agriculture, and Director of Development for the American Cancer Society. She earned her bachelor's degree in political science and international studies from Texas A&M University and her master's degree in business administration from the University of Dallas. We'll have a question and answer period at the end of the lecture, and we encourage you to submit any questions into the chat box during the course of the talk. Now let's all welcome our distinguished speaker and guest, Julie Borlaug.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Dean West and the Brooks family for having me here today. It's such an honor. I truly love being on university campuses And I'm sorry I can't be with all of you. It's invigorating. This is part of why I do what I do. So hopefully we'll have a great discussion today. I take a little unorthodox approach when I speak. I like to be funny, bold, and daring. So challenge me on anything I say, and please, no question is out of bounds for me. I'd also like to say a special hello to my friends at UGA, to Leo Lombardi, to Alex Lamb, and Ella McCullough. Hello. And I understand we have students outside the College of Ag. Thank you so much for attending, because it's not just agriculture who's going to solve and bring innovative solutions to end hunger, but it's going to be those that are studying philosophy, archaeology, economics, political policy, engineering. So we need everyone at the table to end hunger. And you'll notice, oh, I also have to ask, I usually ask all the farmers in the audience to stand up. And I always thank them, because they are why we're here. So if you're a farmer, if you're from a family of farmers, thank you for what you do. And I also like to call out, typically, I've been doing this for a long time, and typically in the past, there's only been a few women in the audience. So it's so great to see so many women and students stepping up and playing a role in agriculture. And I just want to tell you that I'm going to talk a lot about communications today in agriculture, and discuss why it's so important when we talk about acceptance and utilization of innovation and technology to end hunger. I came to Inari, where I work now, because I had been talking a lot about how we've got to change the discussion in agriculture, how we've got to get acceptance of all of the innovations that are there to use in developing countries and within the United States. And I decided it was time to actually put my words to work for me, and came to an opportunity where I could discuss and focus on how can we brand and talk about agriculture in a different way that's accepted. My grandfather created a revolution called the Green Revolution, or was part of a team that helped solve the Green Revolution. I'm asking for a little different revolution. I'm asking for a change in the image of agriculture and the acceptance and how we communicate. So that's my revolution I want to play a part in. So you might ask why I care. Why I care and why I have come to agriculture. Obviously, I don't have a background in agriculture, but I come to it genetically through my family. I was at the Borlaug Institute at Texas A&M University for 13 years, and I got to work in international development. And I am so fortunate to have seen so many parts of the world. So when people think agriculture is boring or unfulfilling, I can tell you it's not. Never did I think I'd be standing in the fields with smallholder female farmers in Kenya or Uganda, or let alone speaking to farmers in Australia. I can tell you all sorts of experience, but it's been the greatest opportunity of my life. And that all came through agriculture. So I came to the Borlaug Institute, and I got to do all of this work in development. I've spent time with farmers in India who people would say were illiterate. And yes, they couldn't read. But amazingly, one of the farmers in a town figured out how to crack a Cisco code and utilize it for their phone to update his village on important issues that were going on. I've been to Africa, as I said, South America, and talked with farmers, saw research and innovation that could change the way we are currently doing agriculture and provide much needed access to better methods. And I've told you one of the biggest things I've done, and it's true to my heart, and it's one of my biggest callings, is I've gotten to meet with the smallholder farmers. The majority are females, and I've seen firsthand the positive impacts of agriculture and innovation, and how there are so many negatives that come from the lack of innovation. And when we talk about innovation, or when I talk about innovation, I'm not talking about the highest form of technology, and I'll talk about gene editing in a while, but I'm talking about basic transfer of information, transfer of technology, simple ways of how in a Coca-Cola cap, because they always have bottled Coke, so we'd show them in a top of a Coke can, that's as much fertilizer as you need. So you're not wasting money and you're not wasting inputs and you're not damaging the land. So it's basic technologies. If we could provide modern tools to them, modern hose, so females aren't leaning over and broken, weeding. Females spend so much time, it's unpaid labor, weeding. If we could free them from that and provide them better technology and control, that would mean that they could do other things that were cared for, whether that were chickens that they could raise and they could sell the eggs and help educate their children from the funds. There's so many different ways technology can change the way we feed the world. I also have a huge belief that no child should be born in a world of hunger and famine. And if you look at this picture right now, I typically would ask someone in the audience, how old do you think this child is? And the answer is 12. He is stunted. He is in first grade. He is learning his ABCs and how to count. 1 out of every 4 children here in the US and globally are stunted. That comes from whether you don't get the proper nutritions and the mother doesn't get the proper nutrition, or also the wrong nutrition. And we have a lot of that here in the United States. When you are stunted, your cognitive skills are stunted. You will never contribute to your family. You will be a burden, unfortunately, medically on your family because you will be susceptible to so many diseases. And this is wrong, and this is why I care the most. It's unacceptable for this to happen. And this is why my passion in agriculture and innovation is so important. I've held the children. I've talked to the mothers who are begging for the technology and the innovation. And it's up to us to help provide that. So why should you care? Along the things, beyond the things I just talked about, if you care about conflict and stability of the world, you see the map in red. And this is a little old, and I need to update this. But if you look at the countries that are most in conflict, they're the most food insecure. Food insecurity breeds conflict and instability. And if you looked back when we had the Arab Spring, that started, and in Egypt it started because food prices were rising. So if you don't think hunger and agriculture affects the world, here's a perfect example. If you want to talk about conservation of land, conservation of animals, Howard Buffett is huge in agriculture. And why did he get involved? Because he's really big in animal conservation. And he saw in South Africa the slash and burn techniques of the farmers because they'd never been taught anything else and how it was inflicting the wildlife. So he did something about it. If you look at the Gates Foundation, they quickly realized they could provide all the vaccinations and medicine for malaria and other diseases, but if the body's malnourished, the medicine and the vaccinations can have an adverse effect. If you care about climate change, sustainability, gender rights, equality, transfer of technology, such as cell phones and all of that, and equality when a farmer in India and Africa, anywhere in the world, deserves the right to have safe technology. And if you care about the rainforest, you care about innovation and technology. I want to give you some personal reflections on my grandfather, because to a lot of people in agriculture, he's this rock star and he's not as humanized. And I like to humanize my grandfather. As many of you know, he was the recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, the Congressional Medal, the Medal of Freedom. He has a statue in the US Rotunda. And he's one of the only, I believe it's 6 people right now who's received all 3 of the awards. He's a warrior against hunger. He was a warrior against hunger. He was a mentor, a farmer, but first and foremost, he was a scientist. He believed the fear of change was the greatest obstacle to progress. He always came down on the side of innovation. His view of science and our advanced knowledge and technology had to be used in the battle against hunger. And I want to personalize him a little more. When I was in 3rd grade, my twin sister and I took him to show and tell. I don't know what we were thinking, but we took him to show and tell with the Nobel Peace Prize. The only question that was asked was if he had Secret Service. And then he was quickly upstaged by my friend's hamster, which we thought was really good for him because he was always working with heads of state and other high levels. So it was kind of funny to see a bunch of third graders kind of look at the guy like, well, the hamster's a little better. I also made my grandfather a promise when he was on his deathbed. And I told him that I would continue to advocate for his legacy. And it's not his legacy, and he wanted people to know this. It was the legacy of all that helped in with the Green Revolution and beyond, and those who wanted to end hunger and poverty. So I said I would continue to carry his voice so that hunger and poverty and those who don't have access to improved seeds and the much needed innovations in agriculture, especially with climate change, would gain access. So why do I talk about communications and how we tell the story? It's because we have huge challenges in agriculture. And a lot of this has come because we haven't communicated in a way that the general public can understand the benefits. We've talked about the benefits to the farmers, we've talked about the benefits within the science arena, but we really haven't explained why the consumer should care. So why can't we in agriculture move from, it's really create a new paradigm. Why can't we move from profit to purpose? Why can't we talk about benefit sharing? Why can't we possibly talk about open source, which makes a lot of people a little uneasy? And that might be crazy, but let's talk about it. Let's move from hierarchies to networks, controlling to empowering, planning to experimentation, privacy to transparency. That's so important. And none of this can be done in a silo. Agriculture can't do this alone. We need the life sciences. We need to bring in the medical community. We need to bring in engineers. We need to bring in nutrition. We need corporate cultures that believe in doing good and want to be a part of something that leaves the world a better place. And that's what's so exciting to be at a young company like Inari. I can tell you all of our research scientists who are young and all that come in want to see better, want to do good. And that's what's important to our culture. But we also have an anti-science movement. And if you look at my grandfather's success in the Green Revolution, the agriculture industry has made huge strides in the fight against hunger and malnutrition. But we did have some unintended consequences. In my grandfather's Green Revolution, they did use a lot of fertilizer. But why? Because they were ramping up the yield so they could feed people and avert a mass famine. Did they know that there was going to be an unintended consequence, such as the pollution and to the rivers and the oceans? No. But one thing the industry did was we self-corrected. And that is a message we always need to bring. Yes, there might have been things that went wrong or were unintended, but we always self-correct and we always want to do better. And I also want to say, when I talk about that, farmers want the best for the environment. They want to take care of their land. They should never be seen as someone in a negative light when it comes to the powerful nature of what they can do and how they can contribute. But the time has come to stop doing business as usual in agriculture. And we at Inari committed to that. I'm committed to that. I know your dean and your college is committed to that. We need to stop talking about yields and all of the things we've talked about for the past 35 years. If you look at Secretary Perdue's Ag Innovation Agenda, it talks about things that the public cares about, and that's how we build trust and acceptance. We need to talk about nutrition. I talk about gene editing and what we can do in biofortification. We need to talk about farmers and how we empower them and provide more choices to them. We need to talk about how we can save water. And we need to be honest with ourselves and honest with the public about what we do and the technology we do. We need to stop talking in short term, in 10 years, and what we can do by 2050. Let's talk about the next 100 years and how agriculture can change things. We need to move from a one-size-fits-all to a more personalized and localized system. Think about personalized medicine. We can have that in agriculture. What happens in California is not the same that happens in Georgia, is not the same that happens in Michigan. Each of those areas need localized solutions as well as the rest of the world. If you look at COVID, and our CSO at Inari, Dr. Catherine Fouet, talks about localized solutions. We're going to have epidemics that happen in agriculture. We have them now. If you look at maize leaf necrosis, if you look at UG99, and that's a wheat rust. If we can find quick solutions, and we can do this through gene editing and stop the outbreak where it happens and localize that solution, we can be ahead. And that's something possibly we wish we could have done with COVID, but it's something agriculture has to look at and be more proactive and look ahead at challenges that are happening in the future. We need to learn from other life sciences, and I've talked about that already. My grandfather did 3 things, or more than 3 things, but things he did when he did the Green Revolution. He made Pakistan and India 2 countries that would not speak to each other. He made both of them agree to provide access to credit for the farmers, fair prices to seed. He asked them to build roads. Most important thing you could do for a developing country, access to roads. And if you look at what that did for us during the wars, World War I and II, that's how we got our food so quickly from the farm into the cities and out to the ports. If you look at, he also looked at irrigation, and he told the countries, you're going to have to irrigate and you're going to have to provide fertilizer. And he also said all of this comes under policy and so many other areas, and the government was going to have to step up and accept these needed changes, or they weren't going to have the needed solution. So that's important to understand. My grandfather also did one other thing that was really smart for his time. When he was training the farmers from India and Pakistan and in other regions of the world, he brought them down to Mexico where his work was done. And he did this on purpose. He wanted young farmers and researchers who were willing to take a chance on a new system. But he didn't want to do it back in their home countries because he knew their elders would be watching them and weren't always accepting of change and were nervous about change. But he wanted to bring the young because he knew they were willing to look at a better system. They went back, they planted the Borlaug seeds, other farmers saw how well it was going, and it multiplied. So it's always great to think outside and train someone outside their normal environment and bring the attitude of innovation and technology and why it's so great. If you look at what Inari's doing, we believe we can disrupt the seed industry. We believe it's an outdated model right now. If you look at what a small business, a new business can do, is we can iterate. Something can happen in our research and we can say, okay, that didn't work, and iterate and change. We don't have a backlog of past technology that we need to make good on. We are looking towards the future. And most importantly, in agriculture, it shouldn't be us versus them within agriculture. Infighting is not going to provide a solution. We need to be a supportive community. We don't need to be competitors, but we all are answering different questions along the value chain. And we need support and build each other up. And if you look at some great young companies that are really changing the game, look at Pivot Bio, look at Benson Hill, look at Plenty, look at Impossible Foods. Look at what some are doing in livestock. It's absolutely amazing. And everyone needs to embrace these changes and everyone needs to follow. If you look at trends in agriculture, we have consumer preferences that we may not have wanted to listen to, but we have to listen to. And one of my great examples is almond milk. The milk industry has fought almond milk and the other milk named products for years, because in the USDA, milk must come from a lactating animal. And obviously that's not an almond, but they've spent millions fighting to try to change almond milk, the name, with milk. However, nothing was going to change because the consumers have accepted it. So why not just get on board, embrace it, and move on? And then you look at Impossible Burger. It was a game changer. They found a solution. They've used innovation technology, and they've even used a little genetic modification there to find a solution that really mattered. So people weren't so interested in how it was done, but it was a solution so they could feel good about not eating beef, but they could still have the taste. You look at data. Data is a game changer in terms of weather information. You have drones, we have cell phones. I can tell you, I've stood out in African fields and looked at UG99, which is, I told you, a wheat rust. Farmers can now take a picture, upload it. It goes to CIMMYT, which is a CG system, which is funded by USAID, the Gates Foundation, and so many other great organizations. They can look at it online, decide if it's UG99, mark it, and we can continue to know where the spread is coming. And that is powerful. It also provides market access for the farmers. But if you look at disruption in agriculture, we have a lot of misconceptions, and we need to work through those. So I moved to Inari for a reason, as I told you earlier. But Inari was formed out of a simple question. Inari has a parent company that has worked a lot in the life sciences and pharma. If you, everyone knows Moderna right now. That is one of their companies. And they thought, why aren't we taking what we've learned in all these different life sciences and applying it to agriculture? Thus, that's why we're working in gene editing. We have a cross-disciplinary approach. Of course, we have people from human biology, we have agronomy, we have software engineering, and data science. It's an interdisciplinary team, and some of our greatest breakthroughs have come from the computer engineering side, who are looking at the problem from a different mindset. We're not just working on CRISPR and gene editing, we're working on epigenetics, promoter fine-tuning, new breeding techniques. We're not limiting ourselves to any one technology. We're fortunate to have Jennifer Doudna, who just won the Nobel Peace Prize in chemistry, and we have George Church as our SSB members. We're looking at step change, not minor changes. Why can't we, in gene editing, multiplex? That means make up to 50 to 100 different changes within a plant to truly make it function better. Because when you talk about drought technology, drought tolerant technology, it's not just one trait within the plant. There's multiple traits that you can turn up, dial up, we say, or some of the traits that are holding it back, and you can dial that down. And again, gene editing is different from genetic modification. Again, we're looking at multiple traits, and we're not inserting foreign DNA. But we need to think boldly, and that's what we do. We think about personalized seeds. That's a goal, a mission we want to get to. Why can't a farmer one day have 3D printed seeds? That's a crazy concept, but let's think big. Let's think long term. We also have marketing confusion when we talk about agriculture. And usually I get a laugh from the audience, so I'm gonna say I hear you laughing. I don't know if you knew that green beans had gluten in them, just to make sure these are gluten-free. We also have the challenges, the anti-science movement. And the fact of the matter is we have a new human strain, and I call them fact-resistant humans. And they're not willing to listen to our science. I like to call out this Himalayan rock salt. It is non-GMO. I don't know, I know the scientists and those in science understand this, but we're not genetically modifying minerals. It's just not possible. So that's false marketing that many people believe. And I have to talk about a personal story. A new Whole Foods opened up in Dallas a few years ago. And my mom and I went to see it, and outside they had all their vendors who were promoting all their foods, and there was a local North Texas beef company promoting their beef, and it was non-GMO. And I said to my mom, I've got to go talk to them. And she was like, please don't. I was like, no, I got to go talk to them. So I went over and I said, what do you mean when you say non-GMO beef? And they said, well, we don't genetically modify our cattle. And I said, of course you don't. That's not allowed. It's not, the USDA. No, you don't genetically modify your cattle. Do you mean you're not providing feed that's been genetically modified, they said, oh, no, 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 we do that. We just don't genetically modify our cattle. Well, I applaud that company because they were playing on the fear of genetic modification. They knew no one in the public was going to dig deeper because the public doesn't understand all the science, and it was benefiting their cells. So congratulations to them. I'm not going to get into the food babe, but you know the power of her reach, she used to have a good reach, and we need to move beyond those who were spokespersons but don't and aren't willing to be challenged by facts. I always, when I speak a lot, I've spoken with Greenpeace on a panel, and when they come at me about innovation technology and we're just looking for big, expensive solutions, I always go back to them and say, we are all looking for solutions. So instead of spending multi-millions on PR campaigns that are built on fear, why don't you put that into research to come up with an alternative? We're all there wanting it. Come up with the research alternative and bring it to the table. Because right now, your multi-million-dollar media campaign is not saving any one life. And a child is dying today because you're not finding solutions. We're going to talk about regulatory. Well, I want to step back. When I talk to people like Greenpeace and some who are anti-science, I always say you can't be anti-hunger and anti-innovation. It just doesn't work that way. And when you talk about regulatory, this is important, especially for a university. We need the government, the public sector, to fund university research that's innovative. When you have government officials or lobbying groups who are lobbying strongly on an anti-innovation method, this affects your research at your university. And we have to pay attention. We also have donor fatigue. And this is something I hate. And if you can't read this, what I posted, I said in 1984, I was 10 years old, and images of the Ethiopian famine shaped my future. Never did I think at the age of 10, my son would also witness another famine. Over 30 million are experiencing a famine today, and still today. Majority are children. Where's the moral outrage and the political courage to end hunger? We can't just say we've been fighting hunger for years and this is just the way, and it comes and goes, and find this acceptable. We have to step up. We have to speak about it. We have to make people aware, and we have to make it part of our promise to end hunger. I passed a slide that I like to talk about, and it was the, let me go back to it. It was the, yes, let me go back for a second. And it was the picture of, I'm sorry I'm doing this to you all, but the popular misconceptions. For the majority of the public, that is a farm. A pretty garden that probably costs $3,000 to do, and it's not even 3 feet long. There are great, beautiful tomatoes, and there are a few hens running around. We all know that's not a farm. And my sister decided to become a farmer. And I told her not to insult farmers, that producing 3 tomatoes was not a farm. But anyway, they spent all this money, built this. They were growing corn, they were growing squash, melons, you name it, they were growing it. And the kids were having a ball with it. And then one morning, my sister called me with fear in her voice. And she said, someone came into our backyard and stole all of our corn. And I said, no, someone did not come steal your corn. That was a raccoon. She was like, there's no possible way a raccoon could have left the corn standing and just stole the cob. And I said, yes, that was a raccoon. And after that, the birds all got to their tomatoes, and they became a little disgruntled, and it wasn't fun anymore. And then the weeds took over, and they wanted to know what they could have done. And I said, oh, I could have helped you prevent that. But they wanted to try it organically. Well, organically is a lot more labor intensive. It is fine if that's the way you want to go. But they quickly learned that farming was not that easy and gave it up. So that's a story I always like to tell because I think it really kind of hits home where a lot of the public, and I'm sorry if I'm making you dizzy because I just realized I went the wrong way here, but it's important that we talk about this. And with Inari, I'm so sorry about this. Here we go. With Inari, we looked at industry communications, and that was something I really wanted to change. And when I came to Inari, our founder was wise to say, while we're working on our research, we want to be able to label ourselves and give ourselves and brand ourselves, not have ourselves branded by the industry. And I'm not going to go through this, but you know, when we make these statements, you know, how will we feed 9 billion more bowls by 2050? The public doesn't see this as a problem. They don't believe we're going to get there. And there's never been a food shortage here in the United States, except maybe some people realized how quickly food goes off the shelf in the COVID era. But no one understands this. It didn't resonate. What is a child holding some dirt and a flower mean to the public? How does that? And then these beautiful, beautiful pictures that are awe-inspiring to me because I see the symmetry and I see the perfection of agriculture and all the innovation that went into that. Well, the public sees this and they see big ag. They see carbon emission. They see spraying and they think of environmental damages. So let's not use those pictures. So when I came to Inari, we wanted to have a completely different look. And if you look at our website, it is very different and it doesn't tell you what we did. It was just something to simply roll out. And these were all interactive. Our website is changing. We've grown up a lot, so please stay tuned. But we wanted to do it differently. And when we came out online, our first tweet was, "We act responsibly." And you clicked it and it asked the question, how do you feed the world without starving the planet? And it was important that we put that out because we weren't going to come out and say we had the solutions, we knew how to do this. We truly wanted to engage in a fruitful conversation. We've also been fortunate to do focus groups. And here is what we've learned from focus groups. So we had millennials who didn't know anything about agriculture. We had millennials who knew about agriculture. We did the West Coast, the East Coast. We did the Midwest. We also had policy people. We also had those within the ag industry. So we got a wide swath, and not all were millennials. And what we learned is just say what you do. Be clear. Don't use buzzwords. Don't use technical scientific language. Don't be ambiguous. They want proof. They want to know the actions and how they're and how they impact. They don't want to know the science. They don't really care about the science. They want to know our intent. Technology was fine with them. They were all okay with the technology, but don't be afraid to embrace being radically honest. Make sure we knew our audience when we were giving the message and talk about safety. Understand that safety is concerned. They also were very concerned that farmers were treated fairly. And of course, they were concerned about the environment and climate change. So how are we going to change this? And how are we going to make innovation and technology work and end hunger? We have the next generation. So all of you undergrads and all of you grad students, you are our answer. You've accepted technology. You understand the role of technology. We need to give you a seat at the table. So those of us who are older need to accept your innovative, out-of-the-box ideas. We need to be there. We need to mentor you, but we need to learn from you. And that is something my grandfather truly believed in. An example of an organization I'm involved in is called Thought for Food Challenge. Please look it up. We did not have any Georgia teams involved this year, but 2 years ago, I give a prize. It's $2,500 and it's called Take It to the Farmer Prize. And it's in honor of my grandfather. And the top 10 teams, of all the teams that work through the program, the top 10 are selected. We usually bring them to where we're holding the conference. They go through a week of boot camp on pitching their ideas because we want to be an incubator who helps promote them and then helps get them funding. The highest prize is $10,000, but I do the Take It to the Farmer. So I always give it to the team that's just not quite there. but where $2,500 would truly make a difference. And 2 years ago, I gave it to an all-female team that was out of Bangladesh. And we really worked with them after. And they were asked to submit to the Holt Prize. And if you don't know what the Holt Prize is, it's a big deal. It's $1 million prize. They won the $1 million prize. So that's what we want to be. We just want to be catalyst, and we want to provide the support and the belief in the next generation and help them advance and give them, again, a seat at the table and a platform. This year we had a team, the Borlaug team that won, the Take It to the Farmer team that won, had a app, and they were in Africa, and they had an app that smallholder farmers could get veterinarian care for their poultry, which is very important, as the eggs, again, help provide an income, and of course, as a protein source. And they don't get to have any vets come out to them. So they got an app, and they could work with a veterinarian to diagnose what was the matter and to come up with a way. And the app itself was 90% accurate at identifying the disease the chicken had. And this is amazing that you're bringing innovative technology to the farm and to the smallholder. And that changes everything, because if you've been to a developing country, their livestock is so important to their livelihoods. So I want to end, because I've talked a lot, and I want to tell you it's frustrating to me that we have so many solutions that are on the shelf right now because people haven't accepted the importance of innovation and hunger. And we need to use it to end famines, to end the human suffering, but we must be allowed. And innovation, technology and innovation are the key, but communication is the key. I really don't need to be giving this part of my speech because you have Alex Lamb on your faculty, and she is brilliant at this. So please access her. Leo Lombardi was involved in one of the best projects that I've ever been involved in, and it was our coffee program that the Borlaug Institute and other universities like Michigan State did in Rwanda. The key to these programs and why they were so successful is we involved the local university, we had the government involved, we worked with the smallholder farmers. Not only did it, and we worked in coffee, so not only did it change the life of these female farmers, and we helped form cooperatives, but it also then brought in healthcare and education and infrastructure. You build up the ag community and the ag sector, and everything else follows. So I am going to wrap it up, but I'm going to put my information up, and that is my future Aggie. I think I've bred a wheat breeder or a scientist, although he says he wants to work in computers and agriculture, and that's probably a good move on his part. But my grandfather, one of his famous remarks was, peace cannot be built on empty stomachs. And this was the 50th year of when he received the Nobel Peace Prize. So it was so exciting to all of us that the World Food Program, an agriculture program, was honored in what they bring to stabilizing and bringing peace. If you want to have, again, nations that are secure and peaceful, food security is the key. They must have adequate food supply. They must have adequate infrastructure, whether that's dry storage technology, cold chain. They need roads, and they need market access. But my grandfather's last words, and this is true, the last words he said were, "Take it to the farmer." And it was a researcher from Oklahoma State. My grandfather had been a vocal advocate for a technology he had come up with, and it was called the Green Seeker. It was a small handheld device where the farmer in a developing country could put it down, and it could read how much fertilizer was needed so that the farmer did it appropriately and benefited from the information. And when this gentleman, professor, told my grandfather about it, he said, "Take it to the farmer." And then he passed away shortly after. So I want to ask you to take it to the farmer. Our innovations are only as good as when they get to the farmer. Leaving them in the research labs, leaving them on the shelves is not going to change anything. They have to get to the farmers. And a land grant is the perfect model of extension, research and extension, and getting it out to the public. And I also like to say, if you're going to try to ban the future, it's just going to happen somewhere else. This might be a little controversial statement, but you know me, look at China. They're moving ahead with gene editing. If we don't know how to utilize the technology, at least utilize the technology and understand the technology, we are going to fall far behind. And remember, 25,000 people are dying today of hunger-related diseases. This isn't a debate they care to wage. They want to see action, and we owe it to them. So as my grandfather said, take it to the farmer. I say take it to the public. Do it for my son, for the future generations. Do it for yourself. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Julie. If you could bring your camera on.
Yes, I don't know what I just did. Hold on. Okay, thank you. Am I frozen?
We're still getting audio, so we'll do our best, and hopefully your video will pop up. But just thank you so much. That was outstanding, very enjoyable, and we appreciate it greatly you being here. As promised, we're going to have a question and answer. There's Julie. We're going to have a question and answer period here. We've already got several questions in the chat box. I would encourage the listeners to continue to ask questions. Vicki McMakin is going to be our moderator, and she's going to read our questions for Julie. So Vicki, if you would proceed, and thank you again, Julie.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you to everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
I want to make sure I'm not muted. Thank you to everybody who's submitted questions already, and please do continue to submit those in the chat. We'll start off with a student question. Courtney Cameron asks, as an undergraduate student hoping to pursue a career in plant pathology research, the increasingly anti-science public opinion in the US can be discouraging. What advice do you have for me and my generation to overcome these challenges and make a difference?
Go talk to Alex Lamb. Truly, go talk and spend time with Alex Lamb. She has many of the answers for this. But again, utilize your personalized stories. One thing that sometimes researchers aren't always the best at articulating why their research is important and what they're doing. So one thing we can do is train researchers to talk or identify people who can speak on behalf of them for their research. The other thing is get on social media, talk about your personal stories, talk about what you've experienced. Personalization goes a lot farther, unfortunately, than data and facts. So make it genuine, make it tangible, and that's how we can get there. But again, Alexa Lamb is who you need to speak to. And by the way, I was on a panel with Alexa last week, and every time I told her name or commented her name, my Alexa spoke, so it is turned off today. I hope that answered the question.
I think it's great. Okay, moving on to Kiona Branham asks, I have a feeling that the reason governments don't work together to end hunger is because of bad relations. Maybe an I don't like a country, I won't help the people, or I don't like that country, so I don't want to help them help my people kind of thing. Are there any organizations or companies that are advocating for change in this specific situation?
I would say everyone that cares about hunger and ending poverty are advocating for this. Look at the Rockefeller Foundation. Although they're working on COVID right now, they're really great about advocating for hunger and poverty. The Gates Foundation is doing this. The Alliance for Science. I could give you a list of organizations. Yes, governments get in the way. Yes, governments are corrupt, but we're able to hold them more accountable. USAID has worked with your university and many others to bring development and research projects to developing countries. It really takes us understanding, and we've done it wrong in the past in the United States of taking our research over and thinking it was going to be culturally accepted. the sweet orange, the sweet potato, sorry, the orange flesh sweet potato has great vitamin A. If you've ever been to Africa, there's a white sweet potato. It's so funny when you eat it, but it's very different. To get that accepted, they really worked on working within the village and the community. And they had very interesting ways how they went about it. So we need to pay attention to cultural sensitivity to get it accepted on the local level. And then we can start putting pressure on the governments. I see people are putting in questions about the CGIAR and CIMMYT, phenomenal organizations that work with governments, that work within them. But unfortunately, starving people, controlling food supply is, something that has been used politically since the beginning of time. And we just have to continue not to become pessimistic or to give up, but continue to be vocal, get the story of those people out publicly, and challenge when we can.
Thank you. That leads into a question from Dave Poisington, who is the director of our Peanut Research Innovation Lab, which is funded by USAID.
Yes.
He says, as one who had the fortune to interact with your grandfather when I joined CIMMYT in 1989, I remember that Norm had a strong commitment to building the human capacity necessary to continue developing the innovations needed in the fight against food insecurity. He was always at his happiest when surrounded by students and trainees in the wheat fields of Mexico. Over the past several years, we've seen a decline in the number of international students at many US universities. This trend doesn't appear to be changing, but the need to train the scientists and leaders of the future is even more important today. What roles do you see universities like UGA playing in the future of human and institutional capacity development? And how can UGA best position itself to accomplish this important mission? That's a big one.
That's a big one, but Dean West and I were talking about this earlier. So if you look back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the land-grant colleges in the United States actually partnered and helped build ag colleges in developing countries. A&M did Bangladesh. I'm not sure which UGA did, but we truly believed in that. We also had where we would bring students over at different, so undergrad, grad, and after their PhD retooling over to the United States. They would work at our universities. They got to see top of the line labs and innovation, and they had a mentor within a university, and they worked with a CG system, so with a CIMMYT and others. So it was kind of a triangle, and it was so that we would prepare that individual to go back to their country and essentially do extension work, to spread what they learned, to help bring along. Unfortunately, the funding for those has really, really shrunk. There still is the USDA Borlaug Fellows Program, but those are only 6 to 9 week partnerships, and there's really no tracking once they're gone unless the mentor university stays in with them. So there's so much we can do. Unfortunately, some at USAID chose to restrict a $3 million that was spent on the Borlaug LEAP program, the Cochrane Fellows, many other programs that brought students from developing countries over here, and they decided to do it in country. I understand that, and I understand why you want to build capacity within a developing country. However, having the experience at a top-notch university and seeing labs and actually getting to work in a real lab is life-changing for these people. So we've got to continue to advocate for this. There's nothing more powerful than advocating, and I'm going to get a little political here, advocating your senators, your congressmen, the money that comes into your university, what is learned, the powerful relationships, the goodwill that's developed is long lasting. And I know you know this, but we've got to talk to people about this. We've got to advocate because when we bring up their capacity, we bring up the agricultural productivity in a different country, we create new markets. And guess where they're going to come? They're going to want to be here in the United States, and they're going to want to have their products here, and they're going to want to trade with us, and they want our products. So again, advocate for your university, for your research, get involved with your government officials and anyone you can talk to.
Sounds like a plan. I think I'll stick with some more questions about your grandfather. I've got one more here. I, like so many others, admire your grandfather's work to save lives through the Green Revolution. What new agricultural innovation or technology do you think he'd be most excited about if he were still alive today?
I'm going to say gene editing. I'm going to say that selfishly because I work within gene editing, but it's a breeding technique. He wanted us to advance. He was an advocate for genetic modification. Gene editing is another phase, and there will be other phases. So he was always an advocate for the advancement of breeding. And when you think about it, when we can do breeding that's far more precise, is going back to the fields less because we have a predictive computational or AI model. We can get the breeding to and the crops to the farmers quicker. You know, his wheat took 13 years of hand crossing to do. So he would love to see something like gene editing, but there's so many across the board, different innovations. So anything that pushed boundaries was safe, good for the environment, should be allowed, and a farmer should have the choice for that.
Dovetailing with, there's a student, we have an undergraduate student who's currently pursuing a degree in agriscience and environmental systems with an emphasis in plant breeding and genetics. How do we change the misconceptions about genetics in agriculture and reduce the fear of change?
Well, I think when we talk about the genome and genome editing, there are words we just don't need to use. And that's how we create fear. When you have a public, and what was it, like 80%, 85% didn't want DNA in their food, we're starting from a deficit. So we need to start and have these open conversations. We need to go to groups that aren't pro-science, but have a conversation about genetics, what genetics are. I work, again, for a company that's in the seed industry, and we have a lot of people who simply want to know, can you just give us a 101 on the seed? I didn't realize the kernel I was eating on the corn cob is the seed. So we need to step back and give basic understanding of science and then build slowly. When we throw out genome editing and all of these other words, it scares the public, and rightly so. I will never understand why anything in pharma, when they do a commercial and it says 100 million ways why they're going to kill you with this prescription, but people call their doctor immediately and talk about it. So we've got to learn somehow from that. But it's a conversation we've got to start with, and we can't come at it through science, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you. After a couple difficult questions, I'll give you an easier one. This one is from Bo Riles. He says, thank you for joining us today. You inspire us. The Take It to the Farmer contest, is the contest open to college students, to 4 age groups, community actors? Who's it open to?
So yes, it's called the Thought for Food Challenge. And I want you to win the highest award. I'd love to give you the Take It to the Farmer award, but we want you to get the big award. It is open to undergrad, grad. You can partner with universities within the United States, abroad. Look at Thought for Food Challenge. Look at the videos this year. It was all done online, but it's really fun. It's a very different conference. It's made for you. It is not made for old people like me. I can't believe I'm saying that about myself, but it is fun, and it's something we want you involved in. And unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of universities from the U.S. involved this year.
Thank you. Okay, there's a lot of great questions, and we're just not going to be able to get to them all today, but there's two questions in the queue that are of people you mentioned here at UGA. So I'm going to go and ask questions. So Leo Lombardini has a question. This is a tricky one. Julie, thanks for your excellent seminar. I've been to many places around the world, and I believe the US is one of the countries where science is scrutinized the most. Evolution, climate change, effectiveness of vaccines, etc., are questioned by many. First of all, have you observed the same? If so, why do you think it's the case? Is it politics, religion, culture? Fox News, he says.
Okay, so Leo gave me such a loaded question because he knows I'm going to answer it. Thanks, Leo. It is all of the things you just said and above. And you know, we've been talking about social media and the influence of it and just, you know, and all that's been going on in the United States and just going to one source. I don't know how we get around that. But the thing is, let's have an honest, transparent conversation when we're talking about agriculture and innovation. Let's understand that people are coming from different backgrounds, people who have never been out of their county, people who have never seen the world, people who don't care about the world. So when you personalize it to them about the benefits of it or about their children or grandchildren, maybe that makes a difference. I would like people just to stay off cable news right now. I would like people to not just take the first thing they see on Twitter or on Facebook, to go Google it and don't look at the first three things that come up, but actually dig down and find real opinions. If it doesn't have any scientific background, it hasn't been in a scientific journal, ignore it. I don't care which way it goes, ignore it. You need to have proof, scientific proof and evidence. And that's something we need to learn. And you know, hopefully with COVID and the medicines and the vaccinations that are coming out, that will change some of what's going on in this anti-science movement. But another thing I want to step back is you can't romanticize agriculture. We can't go backwards. You could talk, you know, to my grandfather and my great-grandfather. It wasn't a pretty way to do agriculture. It was labor intensive. It was input intensive. It was not good for the environment. And we have way too many people to go back to that type of method. So we need to encourage people, and we need to talk about the realities of romanticizing. Leo, the Alliance for Science just put out a great article. I believe I tweeted it or I put it on LinkedIn about agroecology. The EU loves to talk about agroecology. And they look at it more in a very, very green, non-innovation way. And there are some great things that come of that. But when you look, and Africa is where I love, so I'm going to go back to Africa. If you look at Africa, they have been doing it that way for a long time. Their land, their soil's exhausted. Their animals are starving. So that's not going to provide a good fertilizer source. So we have to be more realistic and less romantic and have those conversations. And hopefully that will help. But what I need, what I say most is when you choose to have an advocate speak, make sure that person's a good spokesman. Don't just put up, and this is horrible for me to say, and my grandfather would do it. He called them greenies. When greenies would go after him and talk about you're destroying the environment and give emotionally based arguments, he would come back and say, until you can give me a scientific environment or a fact-based, scientific fact or fact-based argument, I'm not going to talk to you. Well, that was wrong. That was a missed chance. So take every opportunity to talk about the benefits of your work. And again, make them tangible.
Thanks for taking that. Thanks for taking that tough question. Okay, our very last question for today, and I know there's a lot of really great questions here. We'll make sure to pass them all on to Julie. Is from another person you mentioned, Ellen McCullough, and it's a not quite as difficult, and we'll go out on a positive note. She says, "Thanks for a great talk, Julie. I'll never forget the time your grandfather took to advise me about a career in international agriculture over breakfast when I was a senior in college. He was so optimistic about anyone's ability to make a difference. And he pulled out a photo of New York City in 1903, 100 years before, to show me what was possible. What advice do you have for college students today who want to contribute to international agriculture development?"
Well, Ellen, mom says hi, by the way. My mom was her advisor, and we both went to the same high school, many different years apart, but hello, Ellen. So the advice I have is you're the future. You're the ones who are going to make agriculture accepted and people to realize the importance of agriculture. One thing about COVID is I hope people came to realize that food shortages are real and that the importance of the food supply and the value chain. But of course, we didn't really have a shortage. We forced a shortage in some ways. So that's probably not the best way, but have conversations about agriculture. God forbid you're the person on a plane next to me. But when I say I work in agriculture, they go, oh, you work for Monsanto. And then I go into my, and by the time they're done, we're like, oh, we didn't know all of that about agriculture. So take those opportunities. But at universities, you have so many mentors, you have so many opportunities. There's so many international opportunities that everyone needs to look into. Leo Lombardi can talk about international development programs and opportunities to do that. The World Food Program has a great program for young professionals. I could go on and on. You saw my information, reach out to me, but gaining all these experiences from all different sectors within agriculture, from the policy side, from outside agriculture, only makes you more of a, I don't want to say loaded weapon, but only makes you more powerful in your commitment to change this anti-science movement and the way you talk. Again, I'm going to go back to say that, Dr. Lamb, I think you need to do a whole training conversation about this with the university. Oh, and I do want to say, I see a question from Ban, and it's talking about, in the Green Revolution, we talked a lot about production and productivity yields and profitability, and those are still key and important today, but those are messages that we convey to a farmer because that's what's important to them. And many other things are important to them. But when we talk to the public, let's talk about getting carbon neutral in agriculture. Let's get to soil research that can actually produce nitrogen or make a change in that. Let's talk about the positives. We have to change the conversation from what the Green Revolution was because it's very different. And when we talk about a new Green Revolution, it's going to be a localized response for each country and within each country, within each region. So thank you. But thank you for all of your questions. Send me more. I'm sorry we're not in person because I would have stayed around and answered questions all day and all night. But I want to be here for you. My grandfather would say, we all need to be mentors to you. So utilize us and we want to learn from you.
Julie, thank you so much. This has been outstanding. We're so glad that you were able to be here with us today, even though it was virtually. We are very, very pleased, and your lecture was just outstanding. So thank you so much. And I'd really like to thank everyone who has participated today. At one point, I looked at the participants and we were at about 350 people. So thank you so much for being with us today. This is always a very special day for our college family. It's a day when we can take some time and step back and really think about what we do and why we do it and all the excellent work that over the years and that we're currently doing. And we can gain inspiration as well as a challenge from our guest speaker who helps to make us think and think outside the box and look towards our ongoing and future opportunities. Congratulations to our D.W. Brooks Faculty Award winners. Congratulations and thanks for all the hard work that you do as well. And thanks again for everyone who participated today, and have a good day.